Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, May 1st. Derek Van Riper, Saris, Trevor May, all here with you on this episode. We have a big question that's been bouncing around recently. Is the strike zone changing this season? Eno's going to dig into that here with us in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk about a few struggling pitchers, try to figure out why things did not go well for them over the course of the first month of the season, and try to forecast what is going to happen from this point forward. Gentlemen, quick question before we get started. Whose April did you have? How was your first month of the season? Do you have a comp to somebody in the game right now? I feel like I had a Jorge Polanco sort of April, kind of an amazingly good month out of nowhere, and everyone's just waiting for me to come crashing back to earth. But how about you guys?
I did not have an Aaron Judge or Jorge Polanco April. I've been just trying to figure it out. I mean, maybe even like a Tommy Pham April. just trying to battle my way through it. A veteran season, maybe near the end of my usefulness.
That's pretty bleak.
That's a good comp. Pretty bleak. Interesting name pull there. I'm trying to figure out where I am between, Polanco and Kelnick. I'm probably just middle of the road. I think maybe I'm, I don't know. Who's average? It's just
who did what they were supposed to do? Who exactly hit projections for the first month of the season? That's you.
Yeah, who's just been solid. I think that there's been a lot of good. It's been a lot of just plugging away. I think plugging away, seeing some good stuff, being like, there's some adjustments I can make here. But in general, I think just I'm your league average player. I'm rocking a 0.6 WAR right now.
Hey, pacing out for 3.5 this season. I think that's a perfectly fine place to be on the first day of May. Taylor Ward, there you go. Does it all the time. Trevor is Taylor Ward. Join our Discord with the link in the show description if you haven't done that already. And be sure to join the 6 Picks group. New session just started up here on Thursday. Not too late to jump in on that. Let's get to the first topic of the day. Is the strike zone shrinking? What's going on?
Yeah, if you've trolled around looking for, your favorite framers, you might have noticed that a lot of their numbers are not as good. And if you've, I don't know how you would encounter this. We've definitely talked to players who've noticed. The players will notice because they will not get calls that they used to get. But we're starting to see analysts notice it because of things like, hey, why is our location plus model seem kind of weird? Or like, why is our framing model weird? One coach said, why are there only 2 teams that are above average in True Media for framing? That's not the definition of above average. So something has changed. And so we started to look into it, and this is the fewest amount of called strikes in the shadow zone, on taking pitches in the shadow zone, since we've tracked it. So that's a thing. And then what we've also noticed is that balls in the strike zone, called balls in the strike zone, are up a little bit. Basically, it was really bad in 2008. I mean, like a quarter of balls taken in the strike zone, pitches taken in the strike zone, were called balls. Like that, when we started pitch tracking, that's where umpires were at the beginning of pitch tracking. And pitch tracking itself, I think, made them better at the strike zone. And you can see this. And then there's this little uptick in called balls. It's not a lot by itself, but when you start to see that, the shadow zone is shrinking, they're calling balls a little bit more inside the strike zone. There has been a change. And what we are reporting, along with Ken Rosenthal and Jason Stark, is that there's been a change in how umpires are being judged. And we have another graphic that you can throw up here on YouTube to show you. This is 2025 called strikes in the shadow zone put on top of 2024. So you can see that 2024 over the same amount of sample is bigger. The strike zone is bigger. So you can sort of see the shrinking that's happening. And the way that umpires are being judged has changed. They used to have a 2-inch buffer zone around the edges of the strike zone. And that 2-inch buffer zone was if they made a call incorrect in there, they weren't really penalized for it. And that I think that's helpful because humans aren't binary. You look at this is the zone. The zone is probabilistic. It's not, there's no line where it's like that's a strike and that's a ball. We haven't gotten to computers yet. And so they had this buffer zone. Well, now the buffer zone has gone from 2 inches outside and inside to 0.75 inches outside and inside. And that's effectively reducing their buffer zone area by 60%. Of course, the result, if you're a human being and how you're being judged is being changed, you're going to change your behavior. And so what we're seeing is that the zone has shrunk. Now, I think from the league's perspective, this is a march towards progress. This is a better zone. If you look at wrong call percentage, which is basically the number of balls called in the strike zone plus strikes called outside the strike zone, if you add those together as a percentage, this is pretty much by percentage points, second best season, maybe the best season ever in the pitch tracking. So in terms of wrong calls, they're getting it right. Their perspective is this is the best it's ever been. And maybe they're right. Maybe this is what it should be. Maybe if we're going to tighten up towards ABS, if we're going to have ABS, we're going to have the challenge system, then you got to tighten up the zone because it's going to be closer to that. It's going to be closer to the rule book. And so this is the most rule book, quote unquote, the strike zone has ever been. You could also say this is maybe not a big deal. It's like 650 calls have been affected so far. That's only 1.4 per game. I don't know, man. If that one call doesn't go your way or 2 calls doesn't go your way, if you think about it as a 650 calls, you're an analyst or you're a coach, you're thinking about the 650, not the 1.4 per game. You know what I mean? So it's a change. People have noticed it. And the question that we have to, maybe do some more reporting on is just, why are so many people surprised? This was a collectively bargained agreement between the union and the umpires. That was a result. The new buffer zone was a result of that collective bargaining. According to baseball, they told everybody that needed to know. But according to our reporting, we're finding a lot of people high up the chain, low down the food chain, players, executives, GMs, analysts, director of R&Ds, pitching coaches. I haven't talked to a person who knew about this change beforehand. So, it's one of those weird stories because it's, you don't know, from different angles, it doesn't seem like a story maybe. But I think if you're a pitcher and you're in the middle of it, or you're a framer and you're in the middle of it, if you're a pitching analyst and you have to redo your models, if you're a framer who's about to become a free agent, you care about this. So it's something that people care about deeply. And I was just noticing because I was asking Trevor, like, what were you, when did you debut? And you said 16?
14.
14. So when you debuted, in terms of balls called in the strike zone, that year there was 16.7% of the ball of strikes taken in the strike zone were called balls. 16.7%. So that's in the strike zone taken, called a ball. And then over the course of your career, that number went all the way down to 10.5%. So
yeah,
they did get better at calling your strikes what they were. But on the flip side, these shadow zone ones where you were getting calls, those went over time. So the zone tightened up while you were in the game. I guess what was that like? What was that subjective feeling like with the zone? Knowing that maybe ABS is coming and challenge is coming, knowing that the way the umpires, you mentioned maybe even the umpire grading reports that are out on Twitter and stuff. What was your interaction with the strike zone over time?
One interesting thing that I'm just now kind of thinking about too is I was improving my command while the strike zone was tightening, so it was hard for me to tell whether or not I was just getting better.
Was it because?
Yeah, or was it because? It's all of these things. Probably it depends on the day where I was benefiting from it. Probably sometimes, and other times I had just better command, and I was just kind of. They were like, he's making better pitches, right? So that's kind of impossible for me to pull apart. But I think a lot of the things, it comes down to like incentives and incentivizing, or maybe even de-incentivizing for the umpires. So the more they become aware of what a strike, like they're getting feedback. This is what's happening. This is what you're seeing, and this is what that actually is when you see that. Like it's the same thing that how pitchers learn what they're doing, and if the things are moving the set right way or whatever. So umpires over time were getting better,
and plus the machines helping. Yeah.
And then it started to bleed into their collective bargaining, and like, okay, now we're tightening up. We're talking about standards. At least we're establishing them. They're being your performance reviews are being affected by things that we know now with data that we were just kind of looking at and guessing before. So they've also had a revolution in that way too. So of course, umpiring's tightened up and they're more consistent. And I think it started with they got more consistent, and now they're more. Now that they've established those skills well, and like the group of guys that are doing it now are the best that probably have ever been, then they can tighten the thing up and be like, okay, so it's almost like a control. Like we're figuring out where the box is, and now we know where the edges of the box are better. And that's, all of those things
early
together.
on, we had Questek. Questek was even before 2008, and ever since then, we've noticed that like the machines help the umpires.
Yes,
I mean, and machines help the players too.
Exactly, and they've gotten better, and obviously the strike zone, the buffer zone getting tightened, because I think the 2-inch buffer zone's been there for a while. That's been the standard. I don't know how long, but I've heard since I've been in professional baseball, it's always been 2 inches.
You know about the buffer zone.
I know about the buffer zone.
That's another thing. You knew about the buffer zone. So
if
you knew about the buffer zone, then you'd think that you'd want to know about the. So here's another thing. This seems a little unrelated, but look at drag. This is historical drag on the ball. Now, I didn't want to say, I did mention this on the pod a little bit earlier, but now now we're starting to get a significant result here. If you look at the drag in 2025, it is significantly higher than it was in 2024 and 2023. You're going back all the way to the beginning of 2022, and maybe even a little more drag than 2022. You might be going back to 2016 in terms of how much drag there is on the ball. And 2016 was a bit of a dead ball year. So there's more drag on the ball, but no one said anything. It's observable. It's something that anybody who plays with the numbers can see, but we don't get any word about it because I don't know. Maybe some people made too big a deal out of the past, or the media, or is it the media's fault? Like, we're just asking questions. We see these things. You gave us the data, the access to the data. There they are. What's going on, dude?
The drag thing's really interesting too. I just think it comes down to this. It's pretty obvious at the end of the day that the powers that be have made meaningful changes to the game in order to bolster offense. It's just, that's every sport did this and is doing it constantly. Football, defensive players all say how they can't hit anybody. Basketball,
you can't touch them. Yeah.
Basketball, you can't touch them.
No hand checking.
No hand checking. Let the guys get the shots off, the best quality shots, so they can make shots, because we want to see more. Yeah. Now that's shooting them in the foot. I think basketball right now, and NBA specifically, is in their 3 outcome phase. They're going to have to figure out a way to make this more exciting, which was we went into the 3 outcome phase. I think was a byproduct of maybe some of the changes and pitchers being way ahead of hitters technologically, which you wrote a piece about a few weeks ago, which makes a lot of sense as well. So the timing was where we got to fix this stuff because we're getting way too far in there. And so then the pitch clock comes, and then the pickoff thing because we want more stolen bases. So like it's very obvious, and that this is not an indictment on the like. I agree with that. Some of this stuff we couldn't keep going that way, but maybe that there are, along with some of these rule changes, there are some slight tweaks to other things to continue to move us in that direction a little bit faster, because baseball moves slower than all the other sports. And fortunately, I think the hitting revolution, you guys are right. All of you guys wrote that article. You're right. It is moving. They're catching up naturally through their own revolution, which is great. And I think the game is naturally going to move back to this old, I won't call it old school, but a little bit more of an old school, run the bases, hit the ball in the gap, go to first or third, try to steal home Like we had one of those happen recently.
There's a non-zero chance all this is going to work out. Like it's actually going in the right direction. That you up drag so that you don't hit as many homers. That puts more pressure on putting balls in play and singles and stuff, right? And at the same time, you shrink the zone, so fewer walks. You want fewer. You think you push people into the zone, more contact in the zone. The thing that I don't like is when you play around with the zone, there are unintended consequences. When they played around with the zone in the minors, they got both walks and strikeouts, and that's not what you want. Right. And one player was saying if they want to shrink the strike zone to like make it better for command guys, that's the wrong idea, because what they'll end up doing is putting more pressure on stuff. Because if you got to throw to a postage stamp, then you better be throwing some hot stuff. It
better be nasty. If it's in the zone, you gotta be nastier than if it isn't. That's just that. I
have a director of analytics that I'm texting with about this story, and he said it's anecdotally, but he said anecdotally, our big stuff pitchers in the minors are feeling kind of effed. The zone is shrinking on them in AAA, so now they feel like they throw middle more than ever. And then they're also saying like which zone is it? Because I said again, I want to have some sympathy for baseball. They're A/B testing stuff, right? So they're like, okay, Monday through Friday, you guys got the challenge zone. On the weekends it's ABS. We want to have data on all you guys in all these situations so we can see what happens. I get that's a great thing to do if you have minor leaguers, but they're people and they're trying to figure out zones, and they come to the big leagues and they don't know what the zone is. Well,
they don't have the Players Association. They kind of do.
Right. Maybe things will change there.
You got to think about it that way too. Like what pushback will the league get from the minors? Nothing. There's nothing the minor leaguers can do about it. Major league players, they can at least put up a stink, and it'd be a little bit more of a
right. Because if the minor leaguers strike, I don't think baseball would blink an eye. Really.
So you got to remember the pressure to the way they can't A/B test like that. Not straightforward in the big leagues. They can't do it. Or they're not supposed to be whatever. So like,
but we saw a little bit of this spring, right? Challenge system was with the major leaguers. That was a little bit of A/B testing, and I think it was a precursor to this, because if you look at this strike zone and you compare it to last year's challenge system strike zone, which we did thanks to Duke Hill, a Prospect Savant Discord guy. I'll be throwing some visuals down there, and it'll show up in some piece somewhere, because the zone this year in the major leagues is basically the challenge zone in AAA last year.
And that consistency is good, ultimately. I don't think you want different zones at different levels. I think that's pretty much a disaster scenario to come up.
It feels like preparing for a challenge. Yeah. So now that they're in challenge in the minors, they get to the majors, this challenge zone, this is the zone, that's the zone. I mean, you got to have sympathy for baseball, because they're trying to make changes to the sport and make it good. And there is a road where like the drag comes down, it puts more pressure on balls in play. You make pitchers come into the zone, so there's fewer strikeouts. We're seeing strikeouts have leveled out. Like strikeouts are not getting worse every year as they used to, So as a sport, some people said watching, and I agree, because I think when I go to the park, and this may upset Trevor as a pitcher, but like when I go to the park, I don't love watching strikeouts as much, because you don't really, unless you're right behind home plate, you can't really see how nasty your stuff is.
Yeah.
It's just like a line to the plate. Maybe it's a curvy line, or maybe it's a straight line. I don't know. Like, was that nasty? I don't know. But when you're at home, a strikeout can be compelling, because then you're kind of seeing all the movement and stuff. But anyway, so if you wanted to get strikeouts down, some of what they're doing is working.
I think, you look at strikeouts per team game so far this season are the lowest they've been since 2017. So we're at 8.3 strikeouts per team game. It's the Baseball Reference seasons page if you want to take a look at how everything has been changing. Stolen bases, we're at 0.81 stolen bases per team game. That's the highest it's been since 1987. So,
and I count that as new rules. Change. I enjoy stolen bases. I think it's fun to have people running around the base paths.
100%. So we jumped from 0.51 steals per team game in 2022, the last year before they changed the rules, to 0.72 in 2023, 0.74 steals per game last season to 0.81. So we're getting closer probably to that new that new line. But I think that number can tick up even further. If you're right, if the drag on the ball holds up and homers are down just slightly, we're at 1.06 homers per team game, down from 1.12 a year ago. Not much of a change. Could just be an early season thing with the weather being cool. We'll kind of have to see where that goes. I think if you create the game with more stolen bases than you have now, I think that's generally a more exciting product for the average person. The other terrible thing that you want to try and cut out if you can, I don't know if you can do it because, you pointed this out, walk rates stay pretty consistent over time. And there are a few reasons.
That's the weirdest thing for me. Is like there might be thousands of missing strikes at the end of this year, and there might be the same walk rate as we've seen before. And the walk rate is like 9%, around 9% of the history of baseball. And when I asked Trevor about that, he's like, "Yeah, duh, walks are bad."
If you're walking too many guys, you're not in the league.
Worst thing. It's if you walk a lot of guys, there's no quicker way to have a coaching staff or a front office lose faith in you than if you're walking people. We know that. That's like it's the unforgivable sin. You cannot be. That's one way to spend 5.5 years in the minor leagues, like I did, because I struggled with walks until I got to the big leagues, basically. And it's just the way it is. But one thing that is worth looking at and might be interesting to check in with towards the end of the year is how much of the middle third of the zone is thrown into, like how many more pitches are catching a lot more plate, because guys are, instead of being like 3-0, I'm going to throw a slider here, they're just like, I have to throw something I have to be safe here and go for the center because I don't know where the buffer is, or the buffer's harder to find. And that's the way they adjust. Like, you just can't, it doesn't matter if you walk tons of people, you just don't get a pitch in the big leagues. So like they're just getting the guys who don't walk people. That's the number one. That's the first box you have to check in order to get a long look. And so guys who are walking tons of people, they just don't throw enough innings. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, they're out.
It evens out. Yeah,
self-regulating. But yeah, there's the other thing is, with strikeouts, we've leveled it, but we're not like reducing it. And if you do make the strike zone smaller and then need more stuff, like, I don't know, like we're not doing really the openers thing anymore, and bullpen games gets you in trouble, I think, with the bullpen. You don't want to like overuse your bullpen early in the season. You start doing a lot of bullpen games, you have a tired bullpen at the end of the season, So, bullpen games and openers, we haven't seen as much as we thought we would, but we're not seeing starters go longer. And, I was talking to Justin Verlander, and he was thinking like, we just need to be like, starters need to throw 100 pitches, and there can be outs, injury, this, that, whatever. Like, we can have score situations. But I thought that was also funny to have, was it Britt that did the story about like, no, it was Hannah Kaiser who was like, she talked to all the relievers, like, every time they talk about what's wrong with baseball, they talk about relievers.
Yeah, it's always our fault. What do you mean? Everything's our fault. We make too much money, and we're too valuable to the game.
Yeah, and we're faceless or whatever. And I was like, that have to be faceless. Our fault.
That's so funny.
Yeah. The bullpen is where and one of them actually said the bullpen is where the funniest things happen. Yeah, and I was like, sure. Yeah. I think the bullpen is rife for more interesting stuff. But I also get Verlander's a starting pitcher, so he's like, yeah, we should have to be out there. It should be 100. But is there another rule where you're like, you have to be out there for 100 pitches? Like, what rule is that like in the history of baseball?
I mean, it's like the Little League rule.
It's like the 3 batter rule.
Wasn't it in the late 19th century? Couldn't you just ask for the ball wherever you wanted to be pitched? Wasn't that an original rule in baseball?
Yeah, but I don't. This is like
in kickball,
have to stay out there.
Yeah, give me right here. Belt high.
The 3 pitcher rule is the closest. You have to stay out.
90 pitches, but you just add a bunch of caveats, like the one standard, right? Is like if you throw more than 35 pitches in an inning, that's usually the standard around the league. Like, we have to think about taking him out.
Yeah, that was actually one of them. He meant the takeouts he mentioned were like too many pitches in one inning, and then one was like if the game is tight and it's like the 8th inning or 9th inning, then you can just throw.
Or like maybe the rules go away after 7. It just doesn't matter anymore because you've thrown 7. So we've accomplished our goal. We're not worried about it, or 6. But like to get you to 6 innings, basically you got to make a good faith effort to get your starting pitcher through 6, unless something drastic is happening, and then you just add those. Like, what are the indicators? Lots of pitches in an inning. Honestly, pitches in an inning usually will be that. And very rarely a dude's out there, starting pitcher's out there struggling. He gives up like 5 runs and 9 pitches. Like, it just doesn't happen that often. That happens with relievers more than it happens to starters. So like, if that happens, then you just go, well, you need to pitch. You need to throw more balls then. You might want to inflate this thing because stop throwing it down the middle. Like, you got to. And that's something that they can do.
That'd be a weird incentive. You're at 25 pitches and you want to be out of the game.
Yeah, we got to get you out of the game. Throw 10, but we're just like,
just whatever.
Walk them on purpose, but we're actually throwing the pitches now. That would be a weird. That's something that would probably someone would do. Someone would do that.
Like balk a guy home. Like if there was like a blowout rule, and
like guys dropping the ball to get him to go to third because they don't want him to.
Drop it again, score. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think people want that.
I think pitch limit is probably your best option there, but I still don't know how you. I would rather it be incentives than, I don't know. Like, maybe you get one more challenge. I don't know. You get something if you get it. Let's get more creative here. I don't know.
I'm all for incentives, and all this is to say I'm not unhappy with the state of the game as it is right now. I'm not complaining about baseball. I don't hear a lot of people complaining about baseball right now. I think generally we're headed in the right direction. I think if there's a complaint about the strike zone, it's just that people didn't seem to know that this change was in effect. I feel like the only thing I care about with the strike zone, there's 2 things: consistency and transparency, right? Everyone should know where the zone is, what the zone is, and it should be called consistently. If you do that, that's going to knock out 99% of the complaints. So just do that. What's so hard about that?
I think we know what's so hard about that. Because some of it's unilateral and it's not supposed to be. It's just like, we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to have to explain ourselves. And I mean, that's what happens when you have a union and a group of owners. Like, they just. Yeah,
I guess it's also hard to disseminate information sometimes. I mean, like, this is one of those weird things where it's not a rule change. So if it was a rule change, people would know about it, because the rules. I think the rules committee meeting or whatever people go to, people are like people are thinking about, how can I get an edge off this? Right?
Yeah. No.
Like, how can
we? Yeah. How can we be?
Oh, you're doing what now? How many throws over? Like, I gotta get that to the pitching coach. You got to know 3-foot throws over. Like anytime there's like a little thing like that, they care. This was not a quote unquote rule change, so it didn't go out the same channels. If it had gone around the same channels, then we would have had a different reaction. More people would have known about it. So there's some semantics at play here, but it is, I think, and this is editorializing, but I think it's a de facto rule change. You're changing the way the umpires are being graded. That changes the way the zone is being called. It's a de facto rule change. It's not a literal one.
Exactly. And
the strict interpretation versus the loose interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. Technically, it's not a rule change, so we don't. And there are rules around rule changes, guys. Remember, like,
you
have to put it in and wait a year. Now they have to wait 50 days, which we let that go through for some reason. And now, and then now there's stuff they're like, we would rather not have to go through this process. We would rather just like do it. And they know that if that's what you do, it's going to make people, namely, I don't know, the people who are in the Players Association who negotiated the whole thing about rule changes, be like, isn't that a rule change? And they're like, we don't want to have this argument, so we're just going to
we're not going to call it not a rule change. What if the buffer zone was 0? Like, that would change the strike zone tremendously. Like, this reduced, going from 2 inches to 0.75 inches, reduced the area of the buffer zone by 60%.
That matters.
It's 67.5%, but I don't think
it. Oh my god.
Well, let's move on to some other stuff going on around the league. Let's talk about some struggling pitchers. Zac Gallen, maybe not struggling anymore. As we have been recording this episode, Zac Gallen turning in a great start against the Mets. He went 6 innings on Thursday, struck out 8, walked 3, only gave up 1 earned run on a couple of hits. For the season, entering play on Thursday, we saw a slight dip in strikeout rate, not even an alarming drop, really, but big jumps in the walk rate and the home run rate. That was the what's going wrong with Zac Gallen on the very basic surface level. I also noticed there was about a 10 percentage point drop in his left on base percentage compared to his career mark. Usually that sort of thing will straighten itself out over the full season. But the longer term trend with Gallen is pretty clear. His stuff has dropped off in 3 consecutive seasons. He was at a 105 stuff plus back in 2022, down to a 98, down to a 92 last season, and he was sitting at an 88 entering play today. So there were a couple of things that stood out to me in the profile. One, why was the knuckle curve getting hit as badly as it did in the first month of the season? And could Zac Gallen maybe throw more changeups, especially right on right, or is he already sort of maxed that out? Because I like that pitch, man. Like Zac Gallen's changeup is nice. It's a couple right on rights, one to Dansby Swanson, one to Mookie Betts. Like that's nasty. Like that's a good pitch. So what other tweaks does he have that can maybe help reverse this trend of stuff deterioration year over year for 3 seasons in a row now?
I mean, I think he just needs to embrace being a big mix guy as opposed to what he used to be. I think there's 2 Zac Gallens. There's one Zac Gallen who's four-seam curve, right? And he thinks that's his core. And I think a lot of starting pitchers are looking for an identity, and they're like, what are my 2 best pitches? What am I doing at my core? And then what am I doing around that to keep them from guessing, keep them guessing. And I think he needs to be a little bit more like Seth Lugo, which is like, you're always guessing. Like, I think he's transitioned from having any sort of one dominant pitch to being like, I need to throw these 5 pitches in equal amount of time almost. And I don't think he's quite there yet, because you look at just the overall percentages, 48% curveball, 48% four seam. That's pretty high for a guy who throws 93 miles an hour. It's decent shape, but it's not like a dominant fastball. Like 48% is pretty high for that kind of fastball. And then 20% curveballs is he's almost 2-pitch pitcher sometimes against lefties and righties, four-seam curve and four-seam change. I think he really just needs to throw all of them. The cutter is not great, but it's good enough. And, throw that some more, throw the changeup some more, throw the slider some more. Just throw everything more and the four seam less is basically my answer for him, because over time, the four seam, you talked about the drop off and stuff plus, and the stuff plus has really been seen the most in the four seam, where you used to have a 118 stuff plus in 2020 on the four seam. That's down to 92. And, he's retained more of his stuff on his other pitches than he has on that pitch.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say better, more mix, and also his only pitch he has that goes that can be used effectively into a right, because he has that natural supinated like cut. Like when he's yanking, he's cutting the crap out of his four seam. So everything kind of spins and goes that way. He's much more comfortable. It's kind of similar to an extreme example of this is Glass now. Right, everything is him wrapping. Wrapping the ball is the thing that he naturally feels comfortable with, and he's really struggled to get anything to go into a righty or use the inner half against a righty. And he might need a seam shifted sinker or something, or one of those rising 2-seam things.
And his sinker last year, had 2 inches of arm side movement. The power change has 13.
Yeah, so like maybe he uses the changeup the same way like Jason Adam uses his changeup.
Yeah,
like Jason Adam throws 94 and a 91 mile an hour changeup. It's just because he gets 15 inches arm side run. That's what he wants. He wants to run. He doesn't want. So like once you get that much run, the velo change doesn't matter as much, and you can throw it harder. Which the ones you showed us were pretty firm.
It was like 87 and 89, I think, right?
Yeah. And if you're throwing 93 with an 89, use it like that. So maybe using, I think, the changeup usage right and right, instead of trying to go for it, because what he's still using it for, and I think that what we saw with the 2 pitches as well, and he's using it for a swing and miss pitch, which it can be, but maybe he needs to use it a little bit more as a wrinkle also. to a righty to get them be like, oh, I'm going to get this. This is a pitch that's on the table a lot more. And that makes the north to south thing a lot more effective when there is one thing that you have to worry about possibly getting on the label or the handle. And that has a little bit of like heaviness to it. So that could be one. So maybe the changeup takes a little bit more of the pitch mix from the four seam, and that would even things out quite a bit. Or maybe just start there. Where you would use a fastball pin in, maybe just use the changeup instead, and then build off of it and see how everything kind of settles, because he is kind of just doing what he's always done, and I think we're seeing an adjustment to him.
Do you think we get ratios by the end of the year similar to last year? It was a 3.65 ERA and a 1.26 WHIP. Those were 3-year highs. Certainly not bad. Because I don't know if we have a ceiling as high as what he was doing 3 years ago. Like that seems impossible. The 254 with the 0.91 over a strikeout per inning, like that seems like the career year that he won't be able to repeat. But if he could just be even last year's version of himself, that goes a pretty long way towards staving off decline. Like that's at least a useful mid-rotation, especially over a high volume of innings, a useful mid-rotation arm.
Breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. Zac Gallen is using his cutter really hard today. 14% on the cutter. He has never had a game where he used it over 10% of the time.
Never this season or never ever?
Well, I'm confirming that really quickly.
I think he used to throw it a lot more. I think when he was really good, he threw more cutters.
Yeah. That's right. He used to throw it more in 2022. Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah. His most thrown games were all 2022. Late 2022, Zac Gallen had starts where he threw the cutter 25 times twice, and one time he threw it 35 times at a start. Maybe go back to that.
I mean, that fits what we're saying, which is, mix it up some more. And I mean, 2022 was a great season for him. And, for what it's worth, 93.9 on the fastball then, 93.1 now. It's not impossible that, he could do a lesser version of that. I think the ceiling is 2023 when he had the 3.47 ERA, 1.12 WHIP. And I've always thought he had like a little bit of pitchability to him, beyond what the numbers say. So I'm going to give him some of those gains back and say I think he can keep the ERA south of 4. Going forward, I think he can still be a mid-rotation guy in fantasy. In real life, he needs to be a number 2, and a guy who keeps it under 4 and can mix it up, and that sounds like a number 2. He's a guy you'd still play in a playoff situation. I think he's not a guy that you put in the bullpen in the playoffs.
No. Yeah. If he's your game 2 starter in a playoff series, I think you're fine. If that's the good version of Zac Gallen again. So maybe the tweaks are already in progress. Sounds like we generally like him as a bit of a buy low sort of guy you could trade for now if you're looking for some pitching. How about Sandy Alcántara? Is this just a problem of working back from TJ and the command just being the last thing that comes back? We've known this for a long time. So maybe we shouldn't be that surprised. The velocity compared to when he was Cy Young Sandy a few years ago, it's close. The 4-seamer, 98 then, 97.4 now. Sinker, 97.8 back then, 96.7 now. So he's lost a tick there. Slider was 90, now it's 88.8. Change was 91.8, now it's 90.1. Like, that's not enough of a drop to explain why things haven't worked, right? Is this, Trevor's, purely a command question that should resolve as we get further into the season?
Yeah, I think it is vast majority command, because even usage is pretty similar. He still has feel for pitching. It looks like he's still trying to do the things he did. He's just executing a little bit not as good. And the clustering of his pitches, especially during the Cy Young, was like kind of disgusting for a guy who throws that hard. You're like, oh, is this Kyle Hendricks in his prime? Oh no, this is a guy throwing 100. So like, I think he was such an outlier that he's still well above average, especially with all this stuff. So his velo he's gonna get it back. We're seeing it with everybody, like Spencer Strider, same thing. Felix Bautista's now. I just saw him throwing 99 last night. Like, it takes 2 to 4 months, I think, of consistent big league appearances before you forget that you had Tommy John, and it's going to take 10 to 15 starts to get like where he's maintaining his velocity the whole time, and like the command doesn't kind of degrade over time a little bit too. And that's something he never had an issue with before, right? He was like in the 8th inning and he hasn't even sweated yet, and now it looks like he's just laboring a little bit to keep things sharp, and that's just going to come along. So I mean, I don't see any reason that he can't continue to be the Sandy of before, because I think all the stuff's going to be there. And it's not like he has crazy pitches that movement wise in vacuum anyways. They all just work really well to each other. It's not like he has a slider like from hell. It's just a slider, but with the velocity and command is what made it so good. And so like he needs the command, or he's just not as good of, he's not going to be able to go out there. I'm going to throw only sliders today because it's that good. He's just not one of those pitchers.
Yeah, he really became a guy that would throw everything evenly when he won that Cy Young. 4 pitches, throwing almost all within a few percentage points of 25% usage.
This isn't a great question for you, but it is something that I've been talking about. The reason it's not a great question for you is even though you had Tommy John, you didn't really throw the slider especially at that point in your career, you weren't throwing it. It was like a 10% pitch for you.
Yeah.
It looks like you came back with a slightly different slider. Maybe you came back with more of a gyro slider after. It was like 87.
Yeah.
And you came back
I changed my slider like 19 times. So like,
yeah, okay.
I'll be honest, my slider is a terrible indicator of anything about me. But I think this is from month to month.
I think this is important though, because they tell you to not throw the slider when you're coming back from TJ? Like, was there a period of time where you could just throw fastballs, right?
Yeah. You definitely go fastball changeup first. Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's the way. And I've heard that's like, especially Keith Meister with his surgeries, like, that's he's like, this is how you do it. Don't throw the slider for the first 3 months or whatever. It's possible that's just wrong. First of all, it's affecting Sandy right now because he has a 75 location plus on the slider. He's never had it below 100 before. And that's the one pitch that he really can't command. Well, big surprise. He hasn't been throwing it. Like, he's like 3 months behind on the slider than he is on the fastball. So you're like, oh, look, the location plus on his fastball is okay, but it's not on the slider, but he hasn't been throwing it for 3 months. Like, duh. And I did talk to people who were like, who work on this. I work, an expert in rehabbing pitchers who was like, how are you going to come back and throw sliders in the big leagues? And like, you're going to tell me that the best way to rehab this guy is for him to throw in one of his first competitive sliders in competition? Like, if you want him to come back throwing 80%, like throwing fastballs at 80% effort, right? That's your first, like, get back out there, why shouldn't he throw the slider at 80% effort too? Because it's all about building back up, right? So it's so weird that you're like, throw the fastball, don't throw the slider. And then you get the fastball up to like 98. Like hey, look, I'm back. And then they're like, okay, now you can throw the slider. And you're like, whip. Here comes something I haven't done in 15 monthts.
I think conventional wisdom is catching up with that. And you've talked about this too, that like a lot of the research is pointing towards fastball having just as much stress on your elbow, if not more. So like, I understand the whole snapping it off thing too, but I think it was just like the assumption was breaking balls were worse.
They are bad for you. Yeah.
And like even when I was a kid, my dad would be like, hey, we're not throwing a curveball till you're 14.
And I'm not saying that's entirely wrong. I'm just saying, like, if you are going to throw eventually an 89 mile an hour breaking ball, don't like get up to 89 and then start throwing the 89 mile breaking balls. Throw some 83s for a while and get that feeling back, get those muscles, build up.
You don't want to have all your other pitches feel like, oh, okay, I'm going 100%. And you're like, and
then here comes
because you're not going to throw it. Then you're not going to throw it. And then you're like, because you want to compete. So like, let's just make that when you are competing, you feel like you can compete, because that can create other bad habits. And
you'll see Sandy Alcántara slider at league least amount of usage. I mean, his career
just doesn't feel like it's very competitive right now, which is a big That's why he throws all 4 pitches all the time. He's like, they all need to be competitive for me to use them, because I'm a mixed guy, even though I throw 100. Like, I'm just one of those guys. I'm a weird guy who's a guy who throws 100 who is a command pitcher.
I don't know what to tell people to do about it, though. I mean, I guess I would watch the slider percentage. There was one game he didn't throw one at all against the Mets, and I would just watch the slider percentage. I would watch games and see if he's starting to get the slider back. Like, he obviously still has the changeup. but he needs the breaking pitches to get more whiffs. Like he can't just be a ground ball guy.
No, that'd be a pretty uninspiring return if that's what it turns into. But given the timeline with that slider lagging behind, maybe we're talking about him as a mid-season turnaround sort of candidate. It might take a couple more months before it actually all comes together. Even though the long-term outlook is good, short-term outlook might still be a little bit cloudy. Let's talk about Aaron Nola. I think he's tricky. Is the ceiling coming down yet again? His velocity check, just looking this year versus last year, down 1.2 miles per hour on the four-seamer, a 692 slugging against that pitch so far. Sinker's down almost a tick and a half. Knuckle curves down a little over a tick. Changes down. Cutters down a tick and a half. And I've noticed one other trend with Aaron Nola. Pulled fly balls are up year over year, every year, going back to 2022. So
how does that happen? What happens to a pitcher that he gets easier to pull fly balls against? What do you think, Trevor?
Is he throwing more? I don't know if this is true. Is he throwing? I feel like he's throwing more four seams now than he did at the beginning of his career. Because I remember him being a very heavy sinker curveball guy, which was weird. I was like, that's a little
he's
bit
throwing more cutters now than ever. Is it they're pulling fly balls because they're turning on his cutter?
That could be it. Cutters, especially cutters away to righties, are usually not like you want depth. Because you want it on the, like if you're going to hit it, you don't want them to be able to get under it all the time. So that could be it, especially with like that doesn't. It's kind of especially if you're worried about his curveball, which is his always been his pitch that he's been the most confident in for flipping over for a strike and throwing for a strikeout. But giving a pitch that's kind of away or outer half of the plate too, and then making it smaller, and he's not necessarily a hard thrower, so like. It's almost like you throw a slider off the plate down and away, and then you try to bring it back over the plate. The chances that you bring it too far over the plate are high, and the chances that you moving it closer to the bat also makes it easier to hit for them is high. Now you're doing too high probabilities. It's really dumb to do. Maybe the curveball cutter thing is that same thing where they're able to lift it a little more. Guys are guessing right, hitting homers, and then it's just showing up a little bit more in the statistics. That would make more sense to me too. And he was also very heavy ground ball at the beginning, because like I said, he threw a lot more sinkers. He threw a little bit harder, and so maybe that has a little bit to do with it too. But that would be, cutters to righties. That's just generally like limited.
He throws them to righties. He's thrown 24 cutters to righties and 31 to lefties. And last year he threw 177 cutters to righties and 117 to lefties. So he threw more to righties than lefties. And guess what? The slugging percentage on his cutter last year was 796. And this year it's 636. Like maybe he should dial down the cutter usage.
I'm trying to see the movement profile in this too, because it's in my head, I'm seeing it, and I think it moves a little bit more like a little bit more of like a little baby slider thing. It's like not. He throws. He's got a low arm slot and stuff. He doesn't have this like tight cutter. He's got kind of a little hump in it. Everything does, just the way he throws.
Right.
So maybe he uses it or thinks of it that way. Like I have a little bit more of a slider movement to righties, and I use it more like a cutter to lefties. This is a little bit of a guess, but that sounds very how Aaron Nola would think.
Mm-hmm.
Manipulating the ball a little bit more because he's got feel.
He's being a little fine with that pitch, dude. I don't know. I think that should be a surprise pitch that he dials maybe back down. Maybe it's just getting too like 10%, maybe just too much for it. Maybe it's just a pitch he throws once or twice a game. I do get the idea though, because it's like, hey, 3 fastballs, 2 off speed. You this is a better way to turn the lineup over. It gives you something against lefties that you can use. Maybe just stop using it against righties. I don't know. It's what's interesting to me is that Aaron Nola overall still has a decent stuff plus number. And it's because the model likes his fastball still in terms of shape, and it's always loved its curve, knuckle curve, which has lost stuff since it was a 139 stuff plus pitch in 2020 down to 118 now. But it's still a good pitch. So he's still got his out pitch. He's not quite, I think, in Wainwright, or, sorry to say, late Morton territory. That seems far enough off. I think he'll right ship. I think it's a pitch mix tweak. And the other thing is, so Sandy Alcántara maybe had like a slightly bad short-term analysis, but like we think long-term he'll be fine. It's a little bit different for me for Nola, where it's like short-term, I think he'll turn this around. But like in a keeper league or in like a long-term situation, I'd be nervous if I was the Phillies. I mean, you just signed this guy until 2030, for $172 million, and he shows up with a 91 mile an hour fastball.
Right.
I'd be a little bit edge of my seat.
We're getting close to precipitous territory here. Like
exactly. Like if he had 89 next year. Yeah.
We're close to like he's already well below average. So like we're close to being like what's going on here.
Yeah. I look at this more as a situation if you're trying to find pitching in your fantasy league. I'd rather go for Gallen. I'd rather take the longer term shot on Sandy. And I'd rather just be wrong a year too soon about Nola than trade for him right now and have him throw up a 4.25 the rest of the way with maybe a lot of strikeouts, but just generally bad ratios over a high volume of innings too.
He's had full years like that.
Right. He's already, when he had better stuff, he put up years like that. Park's tough. Like I'm nervous about this one. I'm not into the buy low on Aaron Nola, even though there's things you can pick at and say, hey, wait a minute, his zone contact rate's actually really good, 80.4%. That's the best we've seen from him ever as a big leaguer. That's kind of weird in the face of the struggles he's had. But 3 years now where he's had a high home run rate, I think that's generally who he is. Again, because of the park, it's only 6 out of the last 7 years. That's just baked in there. And I don't think you're getting a high strikeout rate, even though it's all volume dependent. So if you think about the tumble of like Kevin Gossman from a value perspective last year, I think that's where we might be with Nola, where it's like, oh yeah, pick 150 next year. Aaron Nola's going to be out there and you're going to talk yourself into him maybe as your third or fourth starter. I think that's probably where we're at based on this velocity loss that we're seeing from him. We got one more topic to go here. It's a game.
No,
I got him.
No,
I got him.
I thought we had another pitcher. Damn it.
I scratched it. I changed the rundown on the fly.
No.
Do you want game A or game B,
B.
Game
Sounds
B.
different.
More
I don't know what they
homers.
What's this?
More career homers, Eugenio Suarez or Jose Ramirez?
Eugenio Suarez.
Yeah, Suarez. Higher career OBP, Nick Swisher or Jeremy Giambi?
Nick Swisher.
No, Jeremy Giambi. More career steals, Andrew McCutchen or Mookie Betts?
Andrew McCutchen.
Why are you thinking about it so long? You got to go. Who is it?
Okay, Mookie Betts.
No, McCutchen. Lower career ERA, Johan Santana or Zach Greinke?
Santana.
Yes. More career strikeouts, Dallas Keuchel or Anibal Sanchez?
Anibal Sanchez.
Yeah, all right. That's good. By a large margin, too. I was surprised by that. All right. You took the player B line, got 3 correct. Trevor gets the player A toss-ups. Here we go, Trevor. More career homers, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Teoscar Hernandez?
Teoscar.
Yes. Higher career OBP, Xander Bogaerts or Manny Machado?
Bogaerts.
Bogaerts, correct. More career steals, Sammy Sosa or Mike Trout?
Mike Trout.
Nope, Sosa. Lower career ERA, Francisco Liriano or Jake Arrieta?
Ooh, Liriano's nasty lefty. But he went
Liriano.
to Japan.
Arrieta. More career strikeouts,
I got your head.
Dickey or Tim Lincecum?
Oh, this is rough.
This is hard. We'll go with Dickey.
No, it's Lincecum.
Is it really? Let's go. I couldn't remember how many more years Dickey played.
Yeah, that's why I threw that in there, because it's an
struck out so many guys.
Absolute mind F. Dickey 1477, Lincecum 1736. So I had one
In
fun
like 9
fact
years.
from this.
I am not the 2024 White Sox. I got one win on the board at least.
Damn.
I am I'm actually impressed. The fun fact, the relationship between two of the players in the player A one that Trevor just played, Teoscar Hernandez hit his first big league homer off of Francisco Liriano, actually.
Oh, wow. And Teoscar's still in the league.
Yeah, that was like Liriano as a
mid-career for Liriano.
That was Liriano as a
before
Blue
he
Jay.
became a reliever.
Blue
Oh,
Jay,
that was
Liriano.
That was like end of days Liriano, I think.
Oh, that when he was a reliever. Okay,
Yeah. But yeah, Teoscar just got to 200 for his career, I think, in the last couple of days. So that's what led me down that rabbit hole. And then the Eugenio Suarez one versus Jose Ramirez. I think that's just a reminder of, man, Jose Ramirez is a great player, and Eugenio Suarez just gets to that power a lot, man. Like that, he's gonna get to 400 for his career. Is he gonna hang around long enough for that?
Yeah. It also is like
Maybe.
you sort of generally associate quality where you're like, oh, Jose Ramirez is on like a Hall of Fame track, but it's like homers are just one of the things that Jose Ramirez does so well. I mean, he has 249 steals. He has a career 350 OBP, and great defender. So, when you're looking at Suarez, you're like, oh, well, Jose Ramirez is better, so therefore he has more homers,
Yeah.
I do like the new graphic that I put together for Ambush. If you're watching on
Which one am
YouTube.
I?
You are definitely Tina in this one. We got a shot from, there's an episode of Bob's Burgers where Aunt Gail runs an art camp. And of course, Tina and her mom are two of the three people there. But Aunt Gail is sneaking up on Tina in the woods as the creative block ambushing her. So that's what we got. That's just nervously awaiting the next disastrous game show segment on our show. I think you're off to an Aaron Judge like start though for May, so you got to feel pretty good about yourself.
May 1.
Yeah, May
1.
1.
On my day, I lose too.
That's right. It's Trevor May Day.
Well, hey, you got 30 more days this month, Trevor. So I think your chances of rallying are pretty good. I'm pretty confident. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. On our way out the door, a reminder, you can get a subscription, theathletic.com/rates and barrels if you don't have one of those already. Join our Discord with the link in the show description. You can find us on Bluesky. Trevor is IamTrevorMay.bsky.social. Eno is EnoSaris.bsky.social. I am DVR.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.